Hey, I believe that the state governments ought to publicly fund public university.
That's a bold statement. Explain further if you please.
Student debt is the second largest debt that university pupils have to pay back in the US and Canada. And in the US, this has happened because the federal government has made new rules about loan borrowing, as to who and how much money can be spent on both undergraduate and postgraduate school. Also, university leadership has drastically increased the prices since the early 90s.
But if the state government's pulled in this new role, how would it solve the debt crisis?
Simple. If the federal government leaves the states to make their own financial rules over public university and privatize the universities which have parochial or non-liberal arts emphasis, and pass laws in those states which forbid private universities from accepting tax breaks or public loans and leave private universities in charge of their treasuries and allow the educational departments of the states to work in conjunction with the bursars of the public universities and adopt frugal policies in both these areas, then this might go a long way to solving this problem.
How would the states default the debt that young adults owe the federal government?
This is more complicated. Because the debt is so large, it may be better to just take away the degrees that loaners have obtained since it got haywire in the late 90s and only give degrees to people who pay off their debt. But since the states have their own educational laws over job appropriation and affairs such as this, the federal government needs to leave university alone to the states, and the states themselves need to pass certain laws or hold certain policies to uphold the fact that no chuching means no degree.
Won't this start controversy if the state governments wish to fight the federal government over who is the boss, over who gets the last say in educational public policy?
Yes, it might. But here's the thing. The 9th Amendment to the Constitution says that any right not mentioned federally ought to go to the states, which education falls under this category. And we already have a mixed system for primary and secondary education. Why not adopt it on the state level for tertiary education? It will take strong state legislative and executive leadership from states such as New Hampshire and Nebraska, which have anti-reverse discrimination policies and bombastic educational systems because of their strivement to advance education in their own right, to fight the federal government.
Besides nullifying federal bossism in education, such as repealing No Child Left Behind and giving back standard consumer protections which were taken away by the Clinton administration in 1994, how else can we blow a bigger bubble for public universities?
There are a few policies which can work in the U.S. if they are applied and carried out incorruptly, such as, if both private and public universities cut back on salaries or jobs which are too costly or unneeded in their areas, this might save some money. Also, if state governments reward good students coming fresh out of high school who have outstanding merit in their grades with more grants, contracts, or appropriations, this would instill a smoother, more prepared pupil, who is educationally stout and financially prepared for university in general. And, if regulatory burdens imposed by local and state governments were made more simplistic and easy to follow, the enrollment or money-paying back processes for students, cut lender subsidies, decrease student reliance on loans to pay for college, and otherwise reduce the loan limits to limit the amount a student may borrow. Give the state governments the power to regulate or to provide action to lower or freeze tuition during bad fiscal years or when ACT scores are low in certain years, and allow state officers to judge and make wise decisions based on the scores and monies involved. There ought to be more educationalist research on the dynamics of student finances and how it impacts the tertiary educational system in general. Finally, both public and private universities ought to have workable job placement or job searching classes or internships that will assist undergrad graduates who wish to enter the workforce upon leaving school.
What about federal lawmakers who say that their grant programs, loan forgiveness programs, or the Federal Family Education Loan Program work in our country? How would the states defend or negotiate the absence of federal involvement in education, since it is unconstitutional and obviously befuddling education, as you so astutely put it?
They would simply declare all federal loan capital bankrupt and ignore these monies in the states, and pass counter laws which force public universities to refuse to utilize any federal money whatsoever in their schools. This anti-federal money boycott would solve this problem short of blowing up the Department of Education in D.C., which is arguably illegal anyway. And obviously their programs do not work because if they did, why is the debt so high anyway? And we would not be having this conversation if the debt crisis was not really, a crisis?
What if DC becomes angry over this boycotting and decides to impose violence in order to get the states to coerce?
They do not have the legal right, nor will they call the bluffs on 11 states who support my plan. Also, according to the implied doctrine of sovereign immunity which is in the 11th Amendment to the Constitution and without judicial say-so from New Hampshire or Nebraska for example, the federal government has no power to enforce its illegal educational policies on these two states, nor have they the right to be sued without state permission. Also, it would be rather foolish to have a war over something like this because the peaceful alternative to leech out federal power and bring the states more authority over what they legitimately have the power to do would be a fool's errand. I seriously doubt this will go to war. There may be harsh protests and some huge lawsuits, but no war.
What you have spoken of seems highly logical and could be done with careful diligence, adept statecrafting, and motivations of the purest sincerity. It will be a long road to combat this crisis which President Jimmy Carter made worse 33 years ago by building an illegal cobweb of silly bureaucracy that was never needed. Because the word education is never mentioned in the federal Constitution, probably because the church had a monopoly on educational pursuits in 1787 and education was viewed more as a privilege than a right in those days.
Why, thank you. Please share this video with anyone who has other good ideas on how to deal with this really large and significant issue not only in our country but in Canada as well. Also, I believe that education is both a right given by the state governments and also a privilege to be enjoyed by all minds who seek to advance themselves in this world we live in together.
This video is dedicated to the protesters in Chile and Quebec who fought so hard to give the blessing of education to themselves and others around the world who want the fruit of knowledge to spread across the globe. Thanks a bundle, you guys. Your free speech shall not have been spoken in vain, my fellow compatriots.
Your pantyhose look hot, madam.
Why thank you, sir. That hat makes you look like a stud muffin.
Talking smack from animation land, we are leaving this foyer with a simple message. Never stop asking why and always reach for the stars. See ya.